Hi, hello everyone. I think we're live.
Awesome. Hello, everyone.
Hey guys,
Hi.
evening.
Hi. Okay, perfect. So tonight actually is a joint product tank from Product Tank Team Vienna and Product Tank Team Linz. And yeah, we have a great speaker for you tonight, Esben from UserFlow. But first, let me tell you briefly what Product Tank is for you who are new here. So Product Tank is a meetup series around the world from product people for product people. And we have people joining from actually over 200 cities. And since everything is online now, you have the opportunity to join product tanks from many other cities as well. And you can find all of the information regarding product tanks, videos, blog posts, and workshops on mindtheproduct.com, which is the organization behind Product Tank. So short intro about us who are here tonight. So my name is Mona, and I've been in product for about 3 years now. And together with Nyla, we took over Product Tank Vienna around last summer, so around a year ago now. And yeah, Nyla, a few words about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm Nyla, and tonight I'm going to be your video operator. And I'm also, as well as Mona, I've been in product management around 6 years or so. And I think that's it for me.
Okay, thanks very much. So over to our co-organizers from Linz.
Hi, good evening. My name's Simon. I'm PM at Iterate. I've been in product management field for about 5 to 6 years now. We're quite a fresh community in Linz, and we've been quite affected by the COVID lockdown from more or less its conception. And I just wanted to sort of raise the reminder that we would really like to host a physical event in Linz in the next weeks, hopefully, before we go into what could be potentially another lockdown winter. Who knows? So just a reminder for any viewers from Linz, if your company is looking to maybe raise its product management profile a little bit and host an event for us, I think that would be a really good win-win for us. Just get in touch with any of the organizers here, and we can get something set up. Now, yeah, moving forward, our presentation today is about how to become product-led and boost your SaaS business. And our speaker is Esben. He's a Dane who's been spending a few years in California. Among other things, founder at UserFlow, where he currently works, and previously, I think, a founder also at a pen test as a service company called Cobalt. I think he's got a kind of unique angle on product-led topics, as he's building a product which enables other companies to become more product-led, while obviously trying to execute what I assume is aggressively product-led product itself in its go-to-market strategy. And I'm just super excited to hear his insights on a really live and pertinent topic for a lot of us, I think. So welcome, Esben.
Welcome, Esben.
Welcome. Hi.
Hi. Well, we will leave you there. And
I think we're muted.
Esben, hi. I think you're muted.
Small detail.
Okay.
So now we hear you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Now I'm here. Hope you can hear me now and also see my screen. A pleasure being here. Thanks for having me. So I guess I can get started with my presentation. If all of you can hopefully hear me and see my screen. I'm very excited to be here today. As Simon mentioned, to speak about a topic that I think is super interesting and is also very trending these days, namely product-led growth. I've named this talk "How to Become Product-led and Boost Your SaaS Business." And I'm looking forward to giving this talk and also answering any questions you might have. Before I dive into the topic itself, I just want to talk a bit more about myself. So as mentioned, I'm one of the founders of Userflow. Userflow is a company that does in-app onboarding, product tours, and surveys. So basically a way to automate a lot of your support and onboarding for customers. As Simon mentioned, we are a heavily product-led company. We are born product-led from day one and have always been. So that's very interesting. Prior to Userflow, I co-founded Cobalt.io, which is a penetration testing as a service company, so also a SaaS business. And in Cobalt, we actually started a transition going from what is called sales-led to become product-led. So I'll also share some learnings that I got out of that experience here today. As Simon mentioned, I'm Danish, but I've been based in San Francisco for the last 8 years. Couldn't leave the nice weather behind, and you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. More than happy to connect. So that was short on myself, but let's dive into this topic. Before I dive into product-led itself, I want to look a bit on B2B software go-to-market in general, because that's really what we're going to talk about today. If you look at the go-to-market history for B2B software, then OpenView Partners, a venture capital company, have made this really nice overview here that actually shows the different kind of eras we've been through. So in the 80s and 90s, we had what they called the CIO era. So you were selling to a CIO because they owned the servers. All software was on-prem. Software was often expensive or very expensive. And the way you were selling was this kind of traveling salesman kind of style, where you went out and met in person always to sell something. Then in the 2000s, early 2000s, Salesforce and other companies came along to introduce software as a service. And we moved into what OpenView here calls the exec era. What they mean by that is as we moved to software as a service, we started selling more to business owners, so like chief customer officer, VP of sales, and so on, started to become the decision makers for software. And a lot of that had to do with the software moving to the cloud. So the servers were no longer a big question here. Software also became more affordable, and more sales were starting to be done via the phone or via conference calls and so on. And then up until today, we've moved more and more towards what OpenView here calls the end user era, where end users are actually making the decisions on what software to purchase for companies, or at least are heavily influencing what software to purchase for companies. Software storage in the cloud has become very affordable and fast, so it's extremely efficient. And software has also become more affordable in general. And now today you even have companies that are giving freemiums and free trials at a much larger scale. It's also becoming more normal that you are buying B2B software directly from the website with a credit card. So I would say today we're probably in some kind of mix between the exec era and the end user era, but we are definitely moving more and more towards full mature SaaS, as I call it, and the end user era, and that is why product-led growth is super important. One report from 2015 from Forrester actually says that nearly 75% of all B2B buyers basically say they find it more convenient buying from a website than buying from a sales representative, and 93% say they actually prefer buying online rather than from a salesperson. So I think this is a super good indication of this kind of end user era. So what is product-led growth then? How does that fit into all of this? Well, on a high level, product-led growth is really a go-to-market strategy. So it involves marketing, sales, customer success, customer support, etc. But it's a go-to-market strategy where you always think, how could our product solve this? So every single team has to think product first, basically. The opposite of product-led is what is called sales-led. So in a sales-led model is the more traditional kind of exec era model where you always have a salesperson or customer success manager present the value of your product. But in a product-led model, you strive for having the product sell its own value without necessarily involving people. The reason why product-led growth is getting a lot of attention these days is because we've seen a lot of companies actually be fairly successful with this strategy. This is just some of them, Slack, Zoom, Calendly, and so on. If we take Zoom as an example, Zoom is giving away a freemium of their product, right? If you're a consumer, you can download Zoom and you can try it and really see the quality of their calls, and you can see the great UX and so on, really experience the value of the product. And that means that these consumers that are also typically employees in companies become advocates of potentially buying Zoom for their companies. So that's one way that Zoom is doing product-led. Slack has a similar model where they also give a freemium, so a small team can start using Slack and then expand over time. And all of these companies have some kind of freemium, free trial product experience in common. As you all know, these are successful companies. OpenView has actually done a comparison between public companies that they consider to be product-led versus companies, SaaS companies that aren't. And what they're seeing in general is that the product-led public SaaS companies are outperforming their peers, mostly in terms of like revenue and value and revenue growth. So what they also see is that this typically happens when you hit a certain scale. So when you hit typically 10 million ARR, that's where you really see the return on investment on being a product-led company. So the early data shows that this model works and is highly effective, especially at scale. So those are good reasons for considering this approach. But let's dive a bit more into the details of what it actually means to be product-led, or what product-led growth actually is. So this is a very binary way of looking at it, but I think it's still good to look at. You can, on a high level, say that in a product-led model, you have no humans in the funnel, and in a sales-led model, you have humans in the funnel. I think this is a bit binary. I don't think it's completely true. You can have humans in the funnel even in a product-led model, but they should not be a need to have. They should be a nice to have. So you should strive for having a model that's fully product-driven and that can live without having humans in the funnel. So that involves things like self-sign-up, online terms and conditions, automated onboarding, and so forth, where the traditional sales model has demo requests. You always have to talk to sales and so on. Productled.com, which is a great community for product-led knowledge, has also made this nice kind of comparison to the traditional sales-led model, where you have the user visits a website, they sign up for a demo request, they have a qualification meeting with an SDR, they get passed to an account executive, they then do a demo, they get sent a contract, there's maybe additional meetings, negotiation back and forth, and then when they buy, they get onboarded with a customer success rep, and then they get to use the product. That actually represents a big risk because the users actually not tried the product necessarily. They've just gotten the perceived value from the sales people. So product-led basically switches that around by allowing the user to experience the product first. So the user visits the website, they sign up for a freemium or free trial, they experience the value of the product, and they potentially even buy without talking to a salesperson. Then over time, a salesperson can maybe step in and help expand the account, but it's really you get the user to experience the value of the product themselves, and then make a purchase decision based on that. So to summarize, some of the benefits of product-led growth is that you empower the end users in this kind of end user era. You grow faster at scale, at least that's what the early data shows. You reduce the customer acquisition and customer service costs because you are removing the need or reducing the need to have humans in the funnel. And then my last one, and this is my favorite, I think the world gets better product when we have product-led businesses. You can no longer hide behind a salesperson selling kind of snake oil. You actually have to have a great product to sell via the product, and that benefits all of us because we get better products. So yeah, so that's on a high level some of the benefits to product-led growth. But how do you actually then become product-led? And I think there are two scenarios here, and I've been in both situations. Scenario one is that you are an early stage, very early stage SaaS business just starting out. And in that scenario, you can just be born product-led and think product-led from day one. I think that's a lot easier doing that than the second scenario, which is you're already an established software as a service business that is primarily sales-led, and now you want to move to this kind of product-led model. So I'm going to speak mostly to the second scenario right here, but I think you can take a lot of the same things when it comes to the first scenario. So I would say the main thing you need to do to move from a sales-led organization to become a more product-led organization is you really need to change the culture. That's the most important piece really, is to change the culture to think product first. And this is not just the product management team that needs to get more power. It's basically the entire organization needs to start thinking product first. So that goes from marketing, sales, customer success, and so on. If you don't have the backing of these teams, they're going to work against your whole product-led movement. So changing the culture is really the most important aspect of going from this kind of sales-led to product-led model. And how do you then do that? Well, it's a lot of the normal change management kind of rules. Number one is you need to have the management buy-in, right? I think that's actually maybe the most important one, that you need to get your management fully bought in to this move. And it's not just one person, it's actually all the leadership of the different functional areas that needs to buy into to this move to product-led. And then what you can do to get buy-in or make it easier to get buy-in is that you can reduce the scope. To give you an example from in Cobalt, what we decided to do was that we had many different segments of customers who were selling to, all the way from like small businesses to enterprises. And we decided to just focus our product-led move on the smallest businesses. The reason for that was that they were more likely to buy self-service because that's how small businesses often buy software. And their scenario was also more simple to build for. They had a much more simple kind of use case than the enterprises. By reducing that scope, it was easier for us to get buy-in from the organization to actually do this product-led move. I want to add the note, but think big, because I still think you can reduce the scope, but you should still have a bigger vision that you potentially want to be product-led for instance, all your segments or whatever expanded scope you might have. But I think reducing scope is a smart way to go about it. And when you've done that, you can then start mapping your desired user journey. Of course, you can look at what user journey you have today, but then you should go out and seek inspiration from what other product-led businesses are doing to see how they go about user journeys when it comes to product-led. There's a lot of companies today who don't reinvent the wheel, go out and seek inspiration and build a desired user journey for this kind of product-led motion. And then you can basically start iterating on that. You don't have to build everything at once. You really have to do small iterations to avoid overanalyzing. This might sound obvious, but really this is one of the biggest kind of slowdowns to the process, is really like if you don't do small iterations and learn the Scrum way here, you really, when you're doing a big change, which is this, to move from sales-led to product-led, you will constantly have over-analysis of the risks of doing something, and then you never move forward. It's a very cross-functional effort. So if you always have to make big decisions, you will never get anywhere. So it's really important to iterate and learn instead of doing big jumps. And then you basically have to drive it as well. This is a top and bottom exercise. It's both a very operational change, but it's also a management needs to continue to buy into it. So this is an effort that requires management, executive management kind of overview, but also maybe a project manager that is not unbiased. It doesn't need, I think you can sometimes fall in the trap to make it somebody from product. I don't think that's necessarily the best thing. I think the best thing is to find somebody who's like unbiased and can connect the dots between the different teams and be like an unbiased project manager in driving this initiative. So yeah, this is of course not very detailed about like what are the what it actually means to build or what are the technical details of building product-led, but I actually think this is the most important. It's changing that culture through management buy-in, reducing the scope, mapping the journey, iterating, and then driving cross-functionally. I think for companies that have tried to go through the sales-led to product-led motion, I think at least that's what I've seen, is that that's also what their experience have been, that this has really been the biggest hurdle to get over. So that's something to take very serious if you decide to go on this journey. But to make the presentation also a bit about what are the technical details of becoming product, I want to switch focus a bit to focus on one very important aspect of product-led growth, namely what is called the aha moment. So you want to make users look something like this guy. In a dictionary, if you look up aha moment, it will say a moment of sudden insight or discovery. In a product-led world, it's really defined as the first time a user experiences value of your product and decides that this is something that they should potentially buy. To give some examples, you can look at these three companies here. So you have Facebook. I can see what my friends are up to. Slack, I can easily communicate with my team and structure topics. And for Userflow ourselves, it's really, I can easily build good looking flows, onboarding flows, product tours without using developers. These are of course all like feelings and kind of like feelings that the user is feeling. So it's very like not very measurable. It's not a metric. So what you often do is you tie these kind of feelings up to some kind of activation metric or aha moment metric. Examples of that could be, for instance, this Facebook has famously had the one, if you add 7 friends in 10 days, you're very likely to stick around. So it shows that they kind of experienced that aha moment when they did that. For Slack, it is that a team has sent 2,000 messages. Then they are sure that they have experienced this kind of aha moment. And for Userflow, our kind of metric is that they spend 30 minutes plus building flows. I want to add a small note to that, because I have here in a parenthesis plus ICP. I think that's an important kind of side thing to this, is that it's not enough that the user necessarily realizes the aha moment. For you, if you want at least paying customers, then it's also important that this is, of course, an ICP. For Userflow, to give an example, if it's a student signing up for Userflow and maybe building some dummy flow for 30 minutes, it's not really, that's not a good paying customer for Userflow. So you have to look at this metric also with, like, is this ICP? And for those who don't know what an ICP is, it's basically ideal customer profile. So you define who's your ideal customer profile. For Userflow, it's, for instance, software as a service businesses, to give an example. So yeah, so that was a bit on these aha moments. But how do you then actually get the user to experience this aha moment for your own application or your own product? I think it's a couple of steps here. Step number one is really, you need to give somewhat free access to your product. Whether that's a free trial, whether that's a freemium, or if you are not ready to do any of those, it could be some kind of click-through experience on your public-facing website or something else, something that represents the product and allows the user to experience the value on their own. I still think any product-led business should strive for moving to a freemium or free trial, and that the kind of public-facing website click-through demos are more a stopgap solution, but it's still something you can do. The reason why I think you need to do this is that you needed to identify the aha moment, and you can argue, I can already identify my aha moment based on what my salespeople are telling me why customers typically buy, and that's true. You can lose a lot of that knowledge to inform what the aha moment potentially might be, but it is just a bit different when a user actually are on their own and is experiencing your product. It might be something completely different than what it is in a sales call, but there is, of course, often a correlation. So when you start looking for this aha moment, you should go out and ask users who just bought or about to buy what made them make that decision. So you do a bit of qualitative research, and you combine that with quantitative research, like using, for instance, session recording tools like LogRocket. You can use Heap and Amplitude, which are product analytics tools to correlate the data. And you can also use tools like Clearbit to tie it to customer profiling, so like size of the customer and so on. When you then have identified your aha moment, you can, of course, always like iterate on that. You don't have to like know exactly what it is, and maybe you change it over time, but you need to then build onboarding that drives towards this aha moment. One common mistake that many companies do when they build onboarding is that they kind of present all the features of the product. They say, welcome to our app, here's feature X, here's feature Y, here's feature C. And it kind of leaves the user with, okay, that's great, you have all these features, and they might be impressed by that. But what is much better to do is actually make it more action-driven. So create X, launch Y, configure C. So the user really realizes themselves that they can do this. For Userflow, as an example, we know that the aha moment is that they realize how easy it is to build flows. So in our onboarding, the first thing we drive them towards is building their first flow. We don't show them all the other features. We just drive them towards a flow builder and have them build a flow to begin with. So we make them realize that aha moment as fast as possible. And then the last bit is remove unnecessary friction. So that can be things like making sign up for the free trial or platform easy, like using sign up with Google, for instance, instead of passwords. For Userflow, we actually had a big friction point, which was that in Userflow to launch it for your end users, the in-app onboarding, you need to use a JavaScript code snippet. So you need to have developers install that in your application. But our trial users are product managers, customer success managers, product designers, and so on. So they don't really they're not developers, right? And so we were adding friction by asking them to go and ask their developers to install something before they have even realized the value. So what we've done instead is that we have made a Chrome extension that allows these users to actually experience the full value of Userflow. They can build flows, they can preview flows using the Chrome extension. And then when they actually have to launch it for end users, then they should still install the code, but then they've already realized the value of our product, and then it's easier for them to go through that friction. So that's an example of that. So to summarize, getting the user to an aha moment, you should give access to your product, maybe to a freemium or free trial, identify what your aha moment is, and build onboarding that drives towards this aha, and then remove unnecessary friction. So yeah, that was 3 overall topics, like what is product-led growth, what is the benefits of it, what it takes to move from sales-led to product-led, and then some technical details about what is called the aha moment. If you want to learn more about product-led, these are some resources that I recommend. So productled.com is a great community for product-led growth. OpenView Partners has a lot of great material. And then at Userflow, we also started doing this thing called Product-led at Userflow, where I share videos on how we do different processes and have built our product in a product-led fashion. And then the last resource here is useronboard.com, is more focused on the onboarding piece. It's a great kind of resource for finding onboarding teardowns, so actually seeing how other businesses are onboarding their users and learn from that. So these are all great resources to learn more about PLG and user onboarding. And if you decide on going on this journey, the last thing I just want to give to you is also that this is a really growing space in terms of tooling. So there's a lot of fantastic tools out there for supporting this journey. You have product analytics tools, you have session recording tools, you have Stripe for in-app payments, you have Loom for doing more kind of scalable support via videos. You have, of course, Userflow for automated onboarding, Intercom for support, and so forth. So there's a lot of fantastic tools out there, and this space is only growing. So don't reinvent the wheel. Go out and find the best solutions. But also always think this, like, iterate and reduce scope. Don't do everything at once, but know that these tools exist and that you can use them to support your journey. So yeah, that's everything from me. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Great, thank you so much for the talk. Thanks. Also for the tools and references in the end. We'll make sure to check them out later.
Yeah.
So Naila, Simon, do we have any questions?
I think we had some at the beginning already. So we have here, I think from Roman, he's asking, what about products that are too complex to give away as freemium, which could harm your image unknowingly? I think this is getting at the idea that if you have an extremely complex field and perhaps a very broad or large product where perhaps it hasn't been built on the most stable usability foundations, what do you risk by letting them? I mean, I've heard this in organizations before as well, basically like, we can't possibly let our potential leads in to see the product because we'll scare them off. Where do you get started on a product like that is basically the question.
Yeah, no, I think so many ways, right? I think this speaks a lot to the best products win in product-led growth. But to give some pointers to what you can potentially do, you can, of course, so first of all, you don't necessarily need to do a freemium. You can do a free trial as well, but that's another thing. But what you can do is like reduce your access to the product, maybe reduce what they get access to, so they don't get access to the entire complex product, but maybe just a subset of the product that is easier to understand and that includes that aha moment. That's one way of doing it. The other way is, of course, to combine that or use something like user flow to guide the user better through where the different things are. So you drive, even though your product might have many different components, you build your onboarding or automated onboarding in a way that drives towards the right actions and the right aha moment. So those are ideas for that. But really the long term is you should improve your product to become less complex and really look at that user journey and how you can improve it.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Sometimes it's a bit like it's actually sometimes the pain relieving capacity of your solution is sometimes shrouded behind a sort of bad packaging, if you like. That's how I often think about it. When you compare it to a physical product, you kind of see you could have this awesome value delivering thing, but it's kind of shrouded in behind either confusing or nebulous pricing, confusing sign up, and it scares you away before you even have a chance to actually understand how valuable it could be. And I think a lot of companies and exec levels don't actually get that product experience in this generation is much more relevant to them than just the solution value. And they're trying to, they don't really understand that it has to be prioritized to be able to catch up. Otherwise they'll be irrelevant in 5 years, because the people who are now buying, as you saw with that, the switch that Esben was talking about, the average age of the vendor analysis or the vendor buyer, if you like, has sunk dramatically. It's falling towards the 30-year-old mark. And these are people who've grown up with, post 2000 digital experiences and not previously. So, yeah. Do we have another question?
Yeah, I think so. From Asad right here. Where it is?
So it's definitely biased. I have a question for myself. Yeah, it's basically around the PLG index from OpenView. You could make the skeptical assumption that they have an interest in promoting the success of their investments. And I sometimes wondered, has anybody tried to handpick 20 stocks that outperform their SaaS index that don't use any product or are very, let's say, PLG averse? Would be interesting actually to know.
No, I think that is a valid objection, and of course you should look closer at numbers always. People will use numbers and stats in different ways. I still think when you look at it, it is. I think it's more than just that analysis from OpenView. It's also a general kind of trend where which companies are most valuable today. And I think Zoom is an amazing example, like a company that's not much older than Cobalt has grown to be a multi-billion-dollar company in no time, right? I think that speaks for itself, just that one use case. So I think, I don't think the numbers are completely incorrect, even though, yes, I agree, you should always look closer at the numbers. No.
So here we have another one. But don't small iterations bring problems with the sales force in a company when they realize that they are made redundant by product-led?
This is a great question, and it goes a bit back to what I talked about with the binary kind of presentation of no humans in the funnel versus humans in the funnel, which I don't completely agree with. I think it's more... it's really two things, right? That's where the management buy-in also becomes important. If the sales leadership are not bought into this, they're not going to present this in a good way to their sales force, right? They're not going to present and explain the reason why you're doing this product-led move, and that it's not making sales redundant. It's just shifting their focus, right? Suddenly the salespeople become much more focused on working warm kind of product-driven leads, right? So people who have already experienced the value of your product, and then they can drive them over the finish line. And they also maybe become more focused on the larger segments, like the big enterprise buyers and that whole more complex buying process that's involved in that. But you get much warmer leads when you get product-led leads, right? Because they have already experienced the value. They know they like this. They know they want this. So it's a lot easier sell, so that it benefits the sales force in many ways.
It also saves you on the post-sales cycle because they've actually learned how to use the product by themselves.
Exactly.
So you don't have to have a sort of consultant team or a customer success team follow up for the following 9 months and make sure that they're actually going to use it, which is often a real sort of risk sometimes, that a company purchases and adoption doesn't happen and it's churned within a year.
Exactly. I think that's super key as well. And also retention. They already know they like this product. It's not something they're surprised. Oh, it didn't have this, it didn't have that, right? It's like they already know it.
I think we have.
Do you guys from Vienna have any questions?
I had one, but I didn't write it. In these large companies, they usually are sales driven, and you already said about management buy-in. But sometimes these high stakeholders, they are totally sales driven. So, what kind of advices do you have to start moving into the product-led growth? Because sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah, I think that's why I started out the presentation with those slides from OpenView, right? That's definitely one way. People think revenue, they think revenue growth, they think value. If you present that to your CEO, they're more likely to consider this approach, right? Like that's really you need to present it like that first. If you're like somebody, if it's not the executive management finding out this themselves and it's coming from somebody else in the company, that's what you need to present to them at first, right? Like the value of this model, like the potential growth that you can get from moving to this model. And then I think the other part about reducing scope is also important. Don't make it a big decision for them. Make it a smaller decision. That maybe it's like all our, for instance, in Cobalt, it was really easy, right? Like all our small companies, they pretty much come inbound. They buy within 1 week. That sales call seemed kind of redundant, right? It seems silly that you had a sales call when people were all more or less ready to buy when they come in, right? So if you present that and just focus on that simple use case, a lot easier to sell into executive management as well, right? Like instead of saying, I think our enterprise customers should, do this where they have long sales cycles and so on. I think that's a harder sell to begin with.
Thank you. I think we have another one from Roman.
Yeah, we've gotten definitely really good feedback from our viewers on YouTube that they really enjoyed your talk, and obviously also the resources you gave us. I already also wrote down useronboard.com. Do you have anything, as Roman asks, for someone totally new to this, which tools you showed, would you recommend especially?
It depends on the area you want to move in, like focus on at first. Where's your biggest gap, right? Like where do you want to start? I think something like a session recording tool is amazing because it's a way to see how users are using your product, where they're making mistakes. I think a lot of companies actually don't have a good transparency into that. And so that's something I recommend, even for post-purchase users, right? Like, so you can see where are the gaps for somebody we just onboarded who are in our product. How are they interacting with the product at first, right? Are they able to figure stuff out, or do they need help from the beginning, right? So I think that's a fantastic product to have in your tool belt.
Without trying to promote your product, Esben, I can recommend UserFlow as I've implemented it at a previous company. And actually, you have a sort of DOM recorder included in your user sessions on UserFlow, so you can actually, I mean, you don't get the visual path of what the user has done, but you know exactly where they've been and you know where they kind of jumped off board for whatever reason. Even if you don't have a flow built beyond that particular point in the application, you can still see the full I don't know, is it a DOM recording, I guess, of what's going on with that user in the application, which is maybe not the intended first use case, but it's kind of like a nice hack. So.
No, and I think the power of user flow is also you put the power in the hands of the business user, so you don't have to wait for some kind of backlog for engineering to come through to reach this point. You can actually start building something in your app and testing it out without involving developers. So that's, again, given this is a cross-functional initiative, you can distribute the work a bit, right? Why is it product and engineering who needs to do everything? Right, that's silly. Let's get the entire organization behind this and think product first. And that's a way to do it.
It's also, just because you had it up on the screen as well, there's been the heap.io. If you're looking into sort of behavioral analytics, it's a fantastic tool because it's sort of like basically a one-time install. You don't have to instrument code to do backward analysis from the point you've actually installed it. So you basically install it and it records all events on your app. And if you decide that you've thought of the wrong path or query or user behavior you want to analyze, you can just retrospectively analyze anything on the whole data set from the moment it was installed, provided you pay for it. Whereas in a lot of other competitors are still operating along with the sort of manual instrumentation model, and it only records that, which is, you really have to, it basically asks you to define all your hypotheses from day one, and if you got it slightly wrong, you have to wait for another cycle of data to come in to be able to validate anything. And I think that's really powerful for those who have the money for it. Got one more here.
Yep.
How can you incorporate your PL approach into your marketing activities?
Great question. I think it's about talking about your product much more in your marketing, right? Instead of it's changing that mindset again. Like, how can I present my product? Of course, you still in marketing, you still have to speak to the value you get from the actual value proposition. That might not be just the product, but it's the actual kind of value realized from the product. But I still think it's like showing your product. Many SaaS businesses surprisingly don't even show their product on their website. They might show like dummy screenshots or whatever. But that's an example of something very basic, right? Like, show your product. It shouldn't be a hidden thing. It's really the key thing you're selling to customers. They should know what they're getting and understand the different features and how they help you realize your value. So I think that's one kind of way of thinking about it. And then you can expand on that in like email campaigns, whatever, to present your product much more. You can, for instance, at Userflow, we've done a couple of things. We have a click-through demo that I can easily share in a link. Basically, we built an onboarding experience in a dummy web app. So I just share that with users, and then they can see, wow, this is what I can build with Userflow. So they see that kind of value of the product, and that's a good marketing, right? Without them even having done any trial or anything.
Okay. I think that was the last question. Do you have any other questions?
I just wanted to ask if you kind of done, or if you have thoughts on what being product led does for your user feedback. I mean, it's kind of obvious that if you build broad digital experiences, you have more things to monitor than if you always have a human driven. And you see companies often building large, nearly, data mines behind the product instead of in the product, just so that their humans can go and take action to the user. And so it's a kind of, you're like not trusting the user with the data which he should be able to enact on himself. So instead of saying, like, hey customer, we've got a new feature, you should check it out, it's cool, try it for free for 2 weeks, you're saying, customer success, check out internal BI tool which tells you that customer XYZ may be interested in feature XYZ, go and try and sell it to him at the next opportunity, scheduled in 3 months. And it's kind of, I kind of wonder if you've got insights or comments there, like how does it improve your like the agility of your data insights? Maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's a horrible question.
No, I think that it's more a release approach. That's more a release approach. Like that's actually post I would say that's post-purchase, right? Like how often do you release? It's more like Scrum practices, right? Like you release features and get feedback. I'm a big fan of that, right? Like that's the best way to do product management is iterate and learn, right? It's just you have to ship your features, and then you can still use things like feature flags and stuff like that to narrow down the group of people, right? But what I think is that you should really use your product. You should give the features out, have people try them and use them, right? And that increases feedback. I'm not. I never trusted a lot on feedback I got through calls when I showed a feature in a demo, because reality is as soon as people get it in their own hands, they're going to do all sorts of other things that they didn't think about when they looked at that demo. So I think that's. Yeah, I think that it's just a no-brainer. Get it out, maybe behind a feature flag, only release it for a certain group of users, let them try it, and let them really see the value and give proper feedback based on them using the feature, right? Instead of this kind of call-driven feedback that's often, some of it is useful, some of it is just like,
it's often not aggregated either in any sensible way, so it's basically anecdotal.
But when it comes to support in general and feedback, right? You can argue, do you then get good feedback when you are when you don't have that constant customer success touch point, right? That can collect feedback. I think that's another thing. But actually, in a product-led model, at least what I've seen with UserFlow is that we get tons of feedback via support chat, right? And we also do surveys like NPS and so on. But actually, the most feedback we get through our support messages, right? Just people writing us because they are missing this, and it's often things like I can't do this on my own. Can you help me, right? Like, or why can't I do this on my own? So you actually see that trend of people don't liking when they can't do stuff on their own. They don't want, to bother, and they think they should be able to do things on their own, right? So that's good feedback to get.
Okay, so
perfect. I think this is all the questions actually we have for tonight. So thank you, Esben, so much for joining us. This was a really cool session. Our viewers also, as we said, really enjoyed it, I think. So thank you also for the resources, and hopefully also you guys can join us live for events, as Simon said. So keep your eyes peeled at our event sites, and all the best to you, Esben. Greetings from Austria, and see you soon.
Thanks for having me, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
bye.